Podcast City Network.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Nest Podcast. Welcome to episode 163. I am joined by our good friend Adam. Adam, how you doing, man?
What's up, Zach? How you doing, man? Thanks for having me on.
Pretty good. Absolutely. No worries. Thanks for coming on. Brandon is on vacation, so I'm running this ship, and it's going to be a fun ride, let me tell you. For those who don't know, Adam's been on a couple times. Big football guy, college football, and obviously NFL. So what better way to kick it off than to just kind of chat about the state of college football, you know, what's going on. We've had a lot of big moves that Brandon and I have kind of glossed over and talked about just a little bit, but I kind of want to dive into that with you because I know you have a more deeper understanding of college football and everything. And first off, just from a couple weeks of play, it seems like Bama is yet again just the king of everything. And I don't see them making anything else other than a championship this year.
I could agree with that. Bama, you know, they're in mid-season form as usual. The only thing right now that is a little rocky is Bryce Young at quarterback, but with time he's gonna, you know, be another Tua probably. But you know, freshman quarterback, we expect those kind of mistakes. He had a couple of not big turnovers, but, you know, he wasn't as efficient as, you know, Mac Jones or Tua Tagovailoa or A.J. McCarron and the previous quarterbacks against Florida this past weekend. And they gave him a pretty good scare down in the swamp.
Yeah, that's true. And that was kind of surprising for a lot of people. I definitely didn't think that Florida would put up that big of a stink to Bama, but you also have to think that these are SEC teams and they play each other quite a bit. So almost like in football, those divisional rivals, the Dolphins beat the Patriots every now and then, you know, even when the Dolphins are terrible, just because they play them all the time. And that's kind of true when it comes to the SEC. And I just think the SEC obviously has such a stranglehold on all of college football that I don't understand how the NCAA hasn't stepped in already and made some sort of decision to try to kind of break up that powerhouse of a conference. Obviously, if you've been living under a rock, you might not know that Texas, Oklahoma have decided to move to the SEC, and that is effective, 2023 or 2025 or something like that?
It's effective 2025, but honestly, that it's probably going to, you know, happen next year. I don't see the reason why they're going to wait around and have some kind of a limbo period. I know the Big 12 did send out invitations to BYU, Cincinnati, I believe, U of H.
UCF.
Yeah, those schools that are, you know, they have ups and downs in certain years, but they're not a consistent, you know, powerhouse conference kind of a team. But, you know, so we'll see what happens. They might push Texas and OU out a little sooner, which I'm okay with as a Longhorn fan. We're not going to be that great for the first couple of years. We're probably going to be middle of the pack, if not, you know, to the bottom half. But I imagine we'll at least be a little better in a couple of years than Brandon's Tennessee Volunteers. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's hard to honestly do well in the SEC because you have those juggernauts that win the conference every single year, and it's really strange seeing the landscape of college football because I mean, for the past decade, maybe even more, Bama and whoever else have kind of traded places as the king of college football. And it's interesting that Texas would decide to go that route because they definitely do have one of the most prestigious histories, I guess you would, because obviously they haven't done a whole lot since the Colt McCoy days. But nonetheless, I mean, they still have a name. They make a lot of money, obviously. So they definitely have the potential to do well in the SEC. And maybe the fact that they can say, hey, you know what, we've got a lot of money to spend. We can bring in a really good coaching staff. And maybe they can start pulling away some of those recruits that would maybe go to Georgia, go to Bama, go wherever, and maybe they can start kind of pulling those recruits to their school. Because I think that's the number one thing that is keeping other schools down is the fact that Alabama specifically can recruit over and over and over and get 5-star recruits every single year, because all they have to tell those kids is, do you want to win a championship or not? And that's really how they draw their crowd. So maybe they can kind of tap into that and get some recruits and get a better group going.
And I think that's ultimately what's going to happen. I think Texas, especially, the biggest thing that hurt them was Texas A&M obviously leaving was over 10 years ago to the SEC. Because, of course, a lot of those players want to go and compete at a high level. And, of course, what's a higher level than playing in the SEC every weekend?
Right.
But, at the end of the day, whenever Texas does move into the SEC, a lot of those recruits are going to look at Austin. It's going to be a new hub. It's going to be like the next Silicon Valley, essentially. And a lot of these recruits, I think, are going to want to go out there, whether it's, for them to get paid by some of these big companies for whether it's sponsorship, because now a lot of these athletes can get paid by their likeness, whether it's Steve Sarkisian hopefully building a program that's going to prosper and flourish down the road. We can only hope so. But, we'll see what happens. I think the biggest, Oklahoma, the problem with Oklahoma is that, of course, they're probably going to win the Big 12 again. They always do. They always, figure out a way, and they kind of know how to beat everybody at this point. The thing is, their defense plays to level their competition. Their defense is decent. They're not the greatest thing on earth. They're not an SEC caliber defense, but they do keep them in games. However, the thing that has hurt OU in the past with the college football playoff is that they're going into this 4-team playoff and they're giving the opponent 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever it is, to prepare for a Lincoln Riley offense.
Right.
Now the problem with the SEC is they're going to have 5 days notice to prepare for this high-powered, air raid attack from Oklahoma. And I think it's going to be, proven much difficult for a lot of these SEC coaches to stop that at the end of the day.
Sure. And this is something that they haven't really seen a lot before. Obviously, they've come into contact with Oklahoma in the college football playoff and stuff like that, where it's just a one-off and you play them once a year or whatever. You mentioned Lincoln Riley, and that's a guy who I definitely expected to move up into the NFL and become at least an offensive coordinator or something. But do you think he's solidified himself as the head coach of OU here for at least a while, 5 years or so?
Oh, absolutely. I think he'll be the next Bob Stoops. Bob Stoops was the man on campus for, 15, 20 odd years, however long it was. I don't think Lincoln Riley is going to go anywhere. I think he's got a good, camp that he's got set up. They're going to be consistently good. 3-4 years in a row they had a quarterback in the Heisman running.
Yeah.
That's unheard of in most places. I'm sure they haven't won the championship, but that's a little thing that they have to kind of change up here and there. And I think they'll eventually get a championship, maybe in the next 5 to 6 years. But I would say that he's going to stay there. We could see him 10, 15 years. He might be there for a long haul.
Yeah. And I think that'd be a very solid choice of his, because obviously they're going to be in the SEC now. The competition is going to be that much tougher. If he can be, a Nick Saban Jr. or whatever, maybe not obviously that level of success, but if he can be, the guy who made a name for himself as a college football head coach and stuck around and made a program like OU successful, then you might as well do it. I kind of expect a guy like him or somebody who gets a little bit of notoriety in the college world to want a big payday from the NFL, but I think there's plenty of money to be made down in college. Nick Saban doesn't seem to be too worried about that. So it's very interesting. Go ahead.
I'll say it's also, money's a big deal, but I think it's a different kind of game when you're coaching in the NFL compared to coaching, college students and going and recruiting. It's a whole different process. Pete Carroll is doing pretty well. He keeps the Seahawks. They're very, competitive every year in the toughest division in the NFL. But ever since those first 5 years that he was the head coach, they haven't really been as, as surprising as most people have thought. Like, sure, DK Metcalf, and they have different recruits come here and there. But those first 5 years, they hit it out of the park with recruits. And I'll go back to saying, I think it is because he had come straight from USC. He had been recruiting those same players for those number of years, and he kind of knew who to go after in that draft. I think, Lincoln Riley, Nick Saban went pro, and that didn't turn out well for him either. I think his recruiting, the way that he gets coaches to come there, players to come there, and just the way that the systems are run in college, I think, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. I mean, you might as well stick around, make your good money, and, at the end of the day, if it works, to stick around.
Absolutely. And I think that's the huge difference in college football coaching and NFL coaching is that with college, you have, especially if you're a prominent head coach, you have a lot of say in the recruiting process. In fact, a lot of coaches are used as a recruiting tool. So there's so much that they can do with that level of control. They basically bring the talent to the school. They obviously cultivate the talent, make it better, make it succeed. And they can do that year after year after year. And whereas with the NFL, you have a draft pick and you have a draft order and you have trades that you can do, but you're kind of fed the talent, and it's very mitigating. And especially with, GMs and owners and people that don't maybe want to spend some money or whatever, it's all very interesting at the professional level. I can see why a guy like Nick Saban would succeed in one and not do so hot in the other, because it's just a whole different world of control and ability to manage things as a head coach. So I think Lincoln Riley definitely fits into that mold of like a Nick Saban-esque type person where he just has found his niche. He's a college quarterback or a college coach through and through, and I think he should stay there as well. Let's talk a little bit about a specific game that happened this weekend. I don't know. I don't think you caught it, but we were texting about it, and I watched just the end of it.
Oh, I caught the highlights. I know which game you're going to bring up.
Yeah, the Penn State Auburn game. That was just very strange. Our buddy Jared, who's in Sportszilla, and they just started a show, is a Penn State fan, so I'm sure he was just livid. But it was such a strange game because obviously you have an SEC school going against a Big Ten school. And let's face it, Penn State is not necessarily in the runnings to win the Big Ten. I mean, Ohio State's a huge milestone to get over.
I think they'll do it this year.
Do you? Okay.
I think they can. I mean, they've been pretty close here and there. I mean, I think if Ohio State's not going to win the Big Ten this year, I think that either Penn State or Michigan's going to do it and knock them off. Even Iowa at this point, Iowa looks great too.
Which is so out of left field for me. I mean, the fact that there was Iowa and Iowa State both ranked and playing each other was just wild. I don't know if that's ever happened.
What's crazy to me is that Iowa State for the last 3 years with Brock Purdy, they go in and everyone's, watch out, they might go to the college football playoff. They're not even the best team in Iowa. This is the 5th or 6th year in a row they've lost to Iowa, which is pretty crazy. And Iowa's kind of flown under the radar in the Big Ten. So it'll be interesting. I would love to see in the college football playoff a different fourth. I mean, we're going to see Alabama regardless, right? Probably another SEC team. I don't think we'll see Clemson, and I don't think we're going to see Ohio State. I just would like to see something different.
Yeah, I think that would be a really nice change of pace. And honestly, I think if Penn State does end up doing it, then all power to them. But anyway, this game in particular was interesting to me because, I mean, I don't know if I maybe have just an aversion to SEC or whatever, but I could clearly see a mismanagement of just officiating from the referees. I mean, there was some egregious calls for sure, especially towards the end. In particular, the targeting call for the late hit in the out of bounds area that was basically just two guys that were going full speed and then expected to stop on a dime. There were several calls in that game that were just so strange, and I was like, I mean, if I'm a conspiracy theorist, I'm putting on my hat and I'm saying that they wanted the SEC team to win that game no matter what, and they just couldn't make it happen, even though they tried. I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying they did a terrible job of hiding it, if that is true.
Targeting is definitely my least favorite penalty they've instilled into, the NCAA and, pro whatever football in general. It's made football a weaker game overall. Maybe okay, but
Oregon, if they win Pac-12, Oregon looked like a bad team this year. Pac-12 never gets any love, so we'll see.
That was a team. I think Oregon could be in the top 4 for sure. But back to targeting real quick. Tom Brady said it best. I think, you're basically saying the defense is at fault almost every single time if there's a hit like that, which is egregious because a lot of the time it depends on where the quarterback is placing the ball. Depends on if the running back is, diving or where their head placement is. I mean, they could be instigating the contact to be head on head.
Sure.
So it's one of those things where it's too harsh of a penalty, and it could jeopardize and change the entire result of a game. I mean, we've seen it happen with certain players where you get a targeting call, you miss the first half of the next game. I mean, that changes it a lot for a bunch of different teams. Besides that, though, I think the biggest blown call for the Penn State game was making them punt on 3rd down.
Yeah, that was insane.
Somebody better have lost their job or been, beaten with a broom today, because that is insane that you can do that.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you about the targeting thing. I understand where they're coming from. They're trying to prevent head-on collisions, head-to-head collisions. They're trying to prevent people from lowering their head and aiming with their head. I get it. But I think it's a little too late to start implementing that when they get to the collegiate level. These kids have been playing since they were very small. And obviously, the smaller you are, the younger you are, the less damage you can inflict. But once you get to high school, that's when it gets pretty serious. And then from there on, how you play the game is how your muscle memory determines how you play the game and how you just react to things. If they want to stop head-on collisions and head-to-head tackles and whatever, it needs to start a lot earlier than college football. And something like this just can't be fixed overnight with just one simple penalty. Like you said, it's egregious because even if the helmets don't collide, just the fact that a player put his head down typically gets a targeting penalty. And we've seen a lot of tackles where the shoulder is the actual thing that is leading the tackle. He just happens to put his head down to get his shoulder in a better position, and he still gets a targeting penalty. It's all just there's so much gray area, and it's just a very sloppy penalty.
It's tough to do with. I mean, all states, specifically in the great state of Texas, all from Pee Wee football, you were taught, shoulders up, you keep your face up, you're leading with your face mask when you're going to tackle. You want to look through what you're tackling. So I understand if you want to call targeting, if someone uses the crown of their helmet, like a spear, that is something that makes sense.
Sure.
But not every single time a helmet hits another helmet, you can call it. It's just, like you say, there's too much gray area. It's a case-by-case basis. You cannot, cast a stone for every single time that someone hits, head on head in football. You can't do that.
Right. No, I completely agree. I don't know if this is going to change anytime soon, because I think just the world as a whole is kind of going towards this way where we're trying to right the so-called wrongs of the past and make everything safer or whatever you want to call it. So this might just be something we're going to have to live with. Maybe they'll tweak it somehow. But I do think it definitely needs to be looked at for sure.
Absolutely.
Do you have any other thoughts about college? I know we didn't really get a chance to talk about it on air, but that first game of the first big game of the season, the Oregon Ohio State game on week 1, that was just next level, and they blew the doors off of the entire college football season, and it was an amazing game.
It was great to see. Off the top of my head, I mean, because I unfortunately had a lot of big plans that happened on Saturday, so I once again could not sit down and just watch football like I wish I could. But man, looking at the highlights, probably one of the greatest interceptions of all time from Oklahoma's DJ Graham. Did you watch that interception by chance?
No, I didn't.
Against Nebraska. Make sure you go check it out. It's one of the coolest one-handed front hand interception and then rolling over, and it was pretty miraculous to watch.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, that State and my Longhorns, I mean, of course they beat the crap out of Rice, but where was that last week when they played Arkansas? So, Sarkisian's got to get it together. They need to, be ready, because we look really bad going into the SEC and we get blown out by a bottom of the tier, team like that. But,
yeah,
they look better. The running game looks good, but we got Texas Tech this Saturday. We'll see what happens.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. The old Gunslingers College, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Obviously, the other big news in the week was week 2 of the NFL. And before we kind of dissect week 2 as a whole, I kind of wanted to knock out our fantasy booms and busts. And I've got a few booms and a few busts here, and we can just kind of run down the list of those and share your thoughts if you have any of your own. If somebody sucked on your team, of course, you can mention those out. And for those out there watching, go ahead and hit me with your booms and busts in the comments, and we can talk about those. My first boom is Kyler Murray. And this is a guy who I honestly did not think would survive very long in the NFL, just simply because of his size. And just, I feel like the second he gets hurt, it's going to be bad, and he won't be able to do the things that he does now for a long period of time. Nonetheless, this week he balled out 33 points, 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. I mean, for a kid who is a lot smaller than the defenses that he's facing, he is just running all around them. He's throwing the ball as much as he possibly wants to. This guy is a huge shocker for me.
That's a good one. So for me, this guy wasn't on either of my fantasy teams. I didn't face him, thank goodness, but he did face against my Seattle Seahawks, and he killed it in the second half. I'm going to go with King Henry for the Tennessee Titans. Almost 48 fantasy points, 3 touchdowns, 182 yards on the ground, and 6 receptions. I mean, in a PPR league, that you can't beat that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he was obviously one of mine as well. This guy didn't really do super great last week. So for fantasy owners that have him, I mean, he really made up for it this week. I mean, almost 50 points. This dude did exactly what he needed to do. So he's definitely at the top of the booms list. My other boom for this week was Cooper Kupp. Obviously, he's got a new quarterback, and they seem to be doing just well. I'm trying to find his stats here real quick. Yeah,
he killed it. He's moving up into the wide receiver 1 category.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. He got 36 points, 9 receptions, 163 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, those 2 touchdowns are the bulk of his points, but yeah, that was stellar. Real close game there in Indy too, which was kind of interesting for the Rams being such a good team. But nonetheless, he balled out, and that's a guy who was probably taken pretty early by a lot of teams. So he's definitely paying off. And I think that's going to continue. Matt Stafford is a much better quarterback than old Jared Goff. So Cooper Kupp is his number 1 for sure, I think.
Is this our last boom that we're about to say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so boom for me, big time. I actually put him in the flex this week. I wasn't sure about starting him because against the Giants defense, he wasn't really ranked that high. But Terry McLaurin went off without Ryan Fitzpatrick. Put up almost 28 points for me, 11 receptions, 107 yards and a touchdown. He showed up big time. Did well. Of course, I ended up losing in that league by 3 points because I put Henry Ruggs on my bench and started DJ Chark, who put up 3 points. But, who knew that Henry Ruggs was going to go off? That could be another boom right there, too.
Yeah, that's for sure. There's always that one wide receiver typically that just, for whatever reason, doesn't have the coverage on him that maybe some of the other wide receivers do, and his quarterback finds him and he just balls. So those are very hard to try to pick, because next week I'm sure he won't do much of anything. Got a comment from Tyler here. Hit a triple crown, winning all 3 matchups even after tonight comfortably, thanks to Mike Evans having a bounce back game. Yeah, that's a guy who was overshadowed last week because Tom Brady decided to throw AB the ball and Gronk and everyone else. He did definitely make up for it this week, but I think I think the Buccaneers offense minus Tom Brady is just going to be a huge revolving door of 1 week this guy gets all the stuff and whatever, which is good for the team as a whole, but for fantasy players it's very difficult to kind of put those people on your starting lineup. On our champ to champ show on Saturdays, I had a starter, or I had a stardom situm, and one of my stardoms was Antonio Brown. He ended up not doing so hot. So it sucks because those guys at any moment and in any game could go off, because Tom Brady can still do it at his age, but some of those guys will just kind of drop off week to week. Let's see. So we can move into our busts. My first bust at quarterback is going to be Joe Burrow. Boy, the interceptions hurt him. He got 10 points, 207 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions against Chicago's defense, which, I mean, I'm not going to say that they're the worst, but they're definitely not known for their elite secondary. So not a great game for him.
Right. I'm going to say my big bust right now is Higbee with the Rams. He's honestly in both my leagues, right? Or one of my leagues. I don't know about our league, but he's pretty much on the trading block at this point. A lot of people are looking to throw him into the fire and see what they could get for him. I mean, he was drafted reasonably high, and he's not really doing a good return on investment for anybody at this point, especially with a quarterback like Stafford in town. You think he'd be putting up some big numbers, but it looks like Cooper Kupp is taking all the points from everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you're going to see a lot more of that. Another huge bust for me has got to be Alvin Kamara. For a guy who was probably taken 5th, 6th overall, for him to get 7 points in 1 week is terrible. He was only able to record 5 yards in that terrible game where Jameis Winston just did a complete 180 of his week 1 performance.
I was going to say instead of Kamara, just the entire New Orleans Saints team is a bust. That was a terrible, display of anything.
Yeah. I don't understand how you could go from such a great performance on week 1 to just completely shitting the bed week 2. I think you might get a little bit more of that from Jameis Winston. He has streaks of excellence. Obviously you saw that week 1, but for whatever reason, he just has games where he falls off. I mean, obviously, famously, he had, a 40 touchdown, 40 interception season with the Buccaneers.
Yep.
I think that's just what you're going to get from him. I mean, he has ability, but he also makes mistakes. So it's strange to me that they didn't try to utilize Kamara's running game a little bit more. I think that's a lost art of his. And obviously everybody knows that he's a threat in the passing game, but he can run too. And I don't really understand why they didn't try to get that going.
I guess my bust, since we brought the Saints, is another team started their running back because I had to draft them high, unfortunately. But the Philadelphia Eagles, they just, from throwing up big points the week before to against the 49ers team that, they're not what they're used to being. And, they just didn't really put up a lot of points. Miles Sanders didn't do too well. Only touchdown of the day was from Jalen Hurts, and that was on the ground. So it's, but hopefully they can bounce back. We'll see what happens. It's the NFL.
Yeah, for sure. I think Jalen Hurts might have a bit of a tough time there simply because he's basically the only guy of his kind on that team. I mean, that team definitely doesn't have a lot of the talent that these teams typically do these days. If you're going to be a competitor in today's league, you need 2-3 weapons on a team just to even compete. I mean, you're going to have to go against teams like the Chiefs and the Rams who have talent all over the place. So
in their own division, I mean, the Cowboys are looking better. The Cowboys look really good yesterday. And then the Redskins too, man. That defense is killer.
Right.
I mean, they're going to be another one, and we'll see what happens with the Giants. They're not a great team, but when Saquon Barkley hopefully is back to 100%, hopefully he does well for my fantasy team. So we'll see.
Hey, there you go, buddy. The last bust that I have is one on my team, and that's Tyreek Hill. For whatever reason, the Ravens decided to double team him all night, and Patrick Mahomes didn't want to force the issue, so he let the lesser known wide receivers and obviously Travis Kelce kind of just eat it up. So, I mean, it sucks because Tyreek Hill obviously is probably an early second round pick for a lot of people. And he only put up 5.9 yards, 3 receptions at 14 yards. So this might happen again because if you're a smart defense, and I don't really think that the Ravens are necessarily a good defense, but I think they have smart coaches. And if you're a smart defense, what do? You shut down the number 1 and number 2 weapons maybe, and then try to see if that quarterback can make his other players work. And I think this time it did. Obviously, they didn't get the win, but I think they scored plenty to win that game. It just didn't work out. And they were able to basically silence Tyreek Hill, but the Chiefs prevailed in a sense. Obviously, like I said, they didn't win the game, but that's neither here nor there. I think just the fact that the Ravens were able to shut down Tyreek Hill is huge because that guy is all over the field. He's obviously insanely fast, and he was just a non-issue for their game.
So it proved well for them. I mean, they ended up coming back and beating the Chiefs, which is a big deal to beat the Chiefs. So
it's huge. It's absolutely huge because I don't think anyone really gave the Ravens a chance in that game. Obviously, we all know what Lamar Jackson is capable of, but for him to do all that was pretty wild.
The pregame show, only one commentator on the panel picked the Ravens, and he kind of just did it just to get different. Just to be different. But I wasn't expecting it.
No, absolutely not. I definitely wasn't expecting it to be a 1-point game as well. It was crazy. The craziest thing to me about Lamar Jackson and the Ravens is that they basically just run wildcat offense constantly. I mean, there's either some sort of option or a rollout pass maybe or something, but it always goes through Lamar Jackson's legs. And they were able to do it enough to beat the Chiefs. I mean, that's absolutely huge. So hats off to them. Do you have any more booms, busts, any other fantasy stuff you want to cover before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of week 2?
In our league tonight, they better not bust like they did last week, but I need Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams to go off. Well, they don't need to go off. I'm only down by, I think, 9 points. But still, they need to show up. And, I mean, I drafted Devontae Adams first overall.
Right.
And then I got Aaron Rodgers, reasonably high. I mean, they need to do something for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've got Aaron Jones on my team, and I'm down by 10 points, so he better get a few handoffs.
And if it were last season, you'd be going into this game right now saying, oh, I'm going to win this. But tonight you're like, I don't know who's showing up. It could be, bum Aaron, or it could be, who knows? Maybe he needs to shave off that man bun. Who knows what's going on?
Have you seen the meme that says Aaron Rodgers looks like he steals catalytic converters?
Yeah. Man, maybe I like Shailene Woodley as an actress, man, but maybe it's, maybe his little fiance is getting in his head or something. Who knows?
It's such a crazy thing because for a guy to go from MVP to just basically, putting his hands up and saying, I don't want to play with you guys anymore. It's just so crazy to me because sure, he probably sees his time with the Packers closing. But if you want to, get traded or whatever's going to happen to another team, wouldn't you want to put your best foot forward and say, this is what I can do? I can still do this at my age and I can do it for 2 years straight. Wouldn't you want to just be the best you can be so you can rub it in their face? And then whatever team you end up going to, they have a great quarterback that they can be confident in instead of some dude who looks like a bum that basically just did not compete at all last week.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, you're trying to increase your stock. So if you're leaving that team and you don't look as great as you have before, who's to say that you're going to get a lot of people reaching out to you? I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of teams are going to reach out and want Aaron Rodgers at least for 2 years. However, you're only as good as the last game that you played. So
right.
Same with Brett Favre. Brett Favre, in my opinion, ruined his legacy for those last couple of hurrahs that he made with the Jets and the Vikings. It just, that's what I remember him as, unfortunately.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've always said that about Brett Favre. The fact that he decided to, I don't know, just try to do whatever he was doing with the Jets and the Vikings. And he had a little bit of success with the Vikings, but obviously everyone knows that his best years were obviously in Green Bay. The fact that he just went out like that is so weird to me. I mean, he could have retired and been one of the best Green Bay Packers players ever, and people would have just remembered that instead of, oh yeah, he went off and played with the Jets for a year. And I think you might see the same thing happen with Aaron Rodgers. He's definitely not gaining any fans by this weird antics that he's doing. A lot of people are kind of shitting on him for it. And if he goes off to some other team and it doesn't work out, he's going to kind of face that same scrutiny as Brett Favre did. Yeah, sure. You were great. You won your one Super Bowl. And then what did you do?
Exactly. I mean, they're essentially looking like almost the same kind of quarterback. Brett Favre, great quarterback, but however, I mean, if you're looking at it, I wouldn't put him top 5 because like a lot of people do, but I think it's a little bit of a favoritism. It's a little bit skewed when they put him up there, but he had one Super Bowl. Same with
Right.
Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he gets MVP awards all the time, but that's a popularity contest at the end of the day.
Sure.
So it's, at the end of the day, he's not really we thought after he beat the Steelers, a long time ago back in, what was it, 2011, 2010, whatever,
Right.
in the Super Bowl, that he was going to get, 3, 4, maybe he's going to be another Brady, who knows? And it certainly hasn't happened that way.
No, yeah, you're 100%. For people that don't remember, he was basically touted as another version of Tom Brady, who's just going to be one of those juggernaut quarterbacks and go on to win 7 Super Bowls. And obviously that wasn't the case. I don't know if that's necessarily 100% his fault. Maybe the Packers should have drafted him some help. I think that definitely would have been the smart move, but they didn't, and that was their decision. It is what it is at this point. And they obviously have basically his replacement waiting in the wings. We really don't know a whole lot about him. They haven't given him much of a chance yet. It's a very strange dynamic there in Green Bay with a damn good quarterback who's almost fading away, and we're just kind of watching it here slowly come out in front of all of us. Let's see some other big games this week. I mean, big for us here was the Patriots game, but that was a no-brainer because they were playing the Jets, so that was just a huge no-brainer.
Yeah, Zach Wilson didn't look too hot in that game.
No, I mean, interceptions just really tore him up, and
Rookie's gonna rook.
Yeah, and I think he's going to get zero help. I mean, basically the same kind of stuff happened to Sam Darnold. Yeah, he was supposed to be a good quarterback, but he played for the Jets. I mean, that's going to be tough week in, week out for him.
One team that showed up for me, and I'm not the biggest fan of the team anymore because of what they've done in the past. But however, I do like seeing a comeback story in a way.
Mm-hmm.
The Texans looked very good against the Browns. If you think of, Tyrod Taylor looked pretty good against them. Then he had to, of course, go out with the hamstring injury, which changed the dynamic of it. Davis Mills came in and looked okay. But had they had Deshaun Watson in there, or even if Tyrod Taylor stayed in there, they could have very well beat the Cleveland Browns.
Which is saying a lot, too, because obviously the Texans are a bottom tier team at the moment. And they looked good last week. They looked good this week. The Browns should have played a lot better than that, I think. And I think that should have been a pretty easy game for the Browns, especially coming off of that tough game against the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
They should be a lot better than this. I really don't know what the issue is there. But the Texans with Tyrod Taylor seem to be pretty okay. Have you heard anything about his status? Is he out for a while, or is he going to be all right?
I'm not too sure, to be honest. I just kind of saw what happened during the game.
Yeah.
And I haven't really followed up with it.
Yeah, neither have I. But I think that's going to be a big blow to that team because I think he fit in perfectly. That's a guy who I've always said just got the short end of every stick he was ever given. I think his best years were when he was with Buffalo, and then he just kind of got traded around.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a guy I think who had a lot of talent, but for whatever reason, it just never worked out. So
in a sense, he's similar to like a Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's a good plug and play kind of player. I mean,
right.
it doesn't matter what offense you're running, he'll figure it out at the end of the day and, show up. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. We usually talk mostly about the Thursday night football game on the Saturday show. But I just wanted to kind of bring that up just a little bit. The Washington defense has not looked great. And I might be a little biased because I have them on my fantasy team, but I mean, yeah, Chase Young is the real deal, but I think the buck stops there. I really don't think that they're the defense that everyone was touting them to be, at least in 2 weeks. In this small little sample size, they have not done well. I mean, for them to allow Daniel Jones to put up 30 fantasy points, that's not good.
And arguably, the Giants won that game had it not been for a couple of, errors towards the end of it. But no, I see what you're saying. I think they should be a lot better than what product they're putting out there. But hopefully it's just early season woes for them, and they're going to, get everything rolling and, show up and look like they should.
Yeah.
But yeah, I completely agree with you. They would have been a defense that I would have drafted early on in my fantasy draft. Of course, not super early, but compared to the other defenses, I would have. But yeah, they're just – especially with the Giants, which is, Saquon Barkley, I would understand if he put up some crazy points, but he didn't. Daniel Jones did. I actually have the kicker Gano on my team. He put up 22 points for me, which
that's awesome.
Yeah, which is I'm not complaining.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I mean, the Giants didn't even really need Saquon Barkley to just beat them up. Imagine if he was at full strength and they were using him 100%. It would have been even worse.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. We got Tyler commenting. Raiders and Broncos tied for first in AFC West. That's a scenario I didn't necessarily see coming. I guess I kind of maybe slept on the Broncos a little bit.
It's week 2. It's
right.
too early to anything. I mean, I've seen it with the Texans go 8-0 and then they fall off the wagon and go 8. I mean, it's too early.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's always which team is hot. I mean, even when I was younger, man, I remember Priest Holmes and the Chiefs were the hottest team on earth during the regular season. I thought they were going to go and, they go in and first round of the playoffs, they get knocked out. Shouldn't have happened, but, it does.
That's NFL fans for you, though. I mean, everything is always way too early, and the takes are always just, way too early that the Chiefs are going to go all the way and stuff, and then they lose to the Ravens and stuff. That's kind of just part of being a fan of the sport. Obviously, last year you saw that with the Steelers going 11-0 and then losing to the Browns and missing the playoffs. Such a funny sport where just crazy stuff can happen. Teams that you think are terrible end up doing pretty all right, and then teams that you think are unstoppable become stopped. And that's an interesting one there in Denver, because now Jerry Jeudy is out for a substantial amount of time with an injury. I'm sure that's going to be a huge hit for them. So you might see that fall off here happen pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Do we catch any other big games? I didn't really. I mean, the biggest game that I saw obviously was Sunday Night Football.
Cincinnati and Chicago. So we got to see Justin Fields come in due to an injury to Dalton.
Yeah.
But man, with how he's playing, I could say in a couple of weeks, I think, if Dalton only misses 2 weeks and Fields doesn't really perform, I mean, I think Dalton's going to take that job back, which is kind of surprising. We were all, with our torch and pitchforks ready to see Justin Fields take the field, but he's been pretty lackluster. I mean, thus far. So it's kind of surprising. I would say the same about Trevor Lawrence too, but then again, he's on a Jags team. They're not the greatest in the world, but I'm also of the opinion that I do not think that he is going to pan out to be some, bona fide badass like everyone's been saying since he was like 9 years old. So,
yeah. He kind of strikes me as the Bryce Harper of the NFL, a guy who has been told he's the next best thing since he was a teenager. And obviously everyone knows that Trevor Lawrence hasn't lost a regular season game until now and whatever. But I've said it before on the show, there's a reason that team got the number 1 pick. And I think he's feeling that right now.
Yeah.
He might be good. He might be better than what we're seeing on the field, but that doesn't change the fact that he's on a less than awesome team. They also lost one of their great young running backs rather that I thought was going to have a great year in Travis Etienne. So they've had some issues. I do not think it's going to get any better. I don't think it's going to get any better for him. And honestly, if I were him, if he's around in 3 or 4 years, I would definitely be looking to get off of that team, which they're kind of like the Jets. I mean, they have a revolving door of number 1 picks and good first round draft pick positions, but that's not the only thing that makes a good team. You need from the ground up, basically good coaching, good owners, good GMs. It takes a whole plethora of things to make a good football team. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to work out super great for him.
Well, I'd say to clarify my point too, it's not a lack of talent and athleticism that he's going to underperform and not pan out. It's all about like you're saying, which team that you get picked up by.
Right.
Patrick Mahomes, phenomenal quarterback. He was a gunslinger at Texas Tech, but who in their right mind thought Patrick Mahomes would be what he is now? But a lot of it is what team he got drafted to.
Sure.
He's throwing to the number 1 tight end in NFL history. He's throwing to a cheetah. He's got, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, as Brandon would say. I mean, he's got a team surrounding him. So
he's got Andy Reid, one of the greatest coaches, coaching him.
Yep.
I definitely think you have a great point there. What would the world look like if the Bears picked up Patrick Mahomes instead of the Chiefs, he'd probably have the same kind of success that Justin Fields was having. I mean, not great. I think Justin Fields definitely has some talent, and he's obviously one of those young quarterbacks that, like a lot of the others, can move. He's mobile. He can run. If you have nobody to throw to, if you have nobody to block for you, if you have no one to pick good plays for you, how successful can you really be?
Yeah. And with Justin Fields, who knows, maybe some more time, he'll eventually get the hang of it, get the swing of things. But for right now, it's looking a little lackluster for him.
Yeah. And I wonder if there's an issue with that team too, because of even though they've said that Andy Dalton is their starter, I still think there's a bit of a up in the air issue with their actual QB1. And I wonder if that's kind of messing with maybe even both of their heads. Obviously when you know that there's a guy ready to take your job, that can either fire you up and motivate you, or that can make you crush under the pressure. And I think maybe Justin Fields is kind of maybe feeling a little bit of that. Like, if I don't perform perfectly, I'm not going to get this job, and I'm going to be a second string, and who knows what happens. And I wonder if the same would have happened to Mac Jones if the Patriots would have kept Cam Newton around. Like, obviously Cam Newton is going to be fighting for that job because he's the old dog. He didn't have a great year last year. There's been some weird COVID stuff this year. And obviously the Patriots have this shiny new toy in Mac Jones, but they did it smartly, I think. I think it's definitely wise to have a veteran backup that you can kind of call up if the young kid goes down or just doesn't work out or whatever. But from what they saw in preseason and all that stuff, they wanted to go in on Mac Jones, and they did, and they released Cam Newton. And I think that's almost kind of panning out at this point. Mac Jones obviously isn't lighting the world on fire, but he's definitely doing a solid job. They should have won that Dolphins game week 1. That was just it is what it is type scenario. Week 2 obviously is a no-brainer against the Jets. So the kid is looking good. And I think maybe part of that success is the fact that he doesn't have to look over his shoulder and worry about the next guy up trying to beat him for his job.
Well, with Mac Jones, the one thing they said about him, before the NFL draft and everything was, he is the one quarterback of the top 4 or 5 that is game ready on day one when you bring him into the NFL. And that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, 100%. Early on, I was of the mindset that if you were a Patriots fan, you wanted Cam Newton to do well because that would give Mac Jones all that much more time to learn the playbook and get used to it and everything like that. And it doesn't seem like that's a factor. I think he's, like you said, he's ready to go. That just kind of shows just the level of talent that Alabama can bring into its organization. I think you and I and Brandon texted about it over the weekend, but Bama has 3 alumni starting quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
The crazy thing about it is back in 2010, before Tua pretty much. Yeah. It was basically before Tua and Jalen, it was the quarterbacks were good, but they were game managers. McElroy, you had AJ McCarron was a good quarterback in college, but essentially a game manager. It was either, throw a dump to Julio Jones, or you're going to pitch it to Derrick Henry or TJ Yeldon or Mark Ingram and all the different crazy running backs they had. Mm-hmm. But we're seeing Mac Jones, Tua Tagovailoa, and we're seeing Jalen Hurts, who are, top-notch quarterbacks, going to Bama and then performing in the NFL, it's crazy to see how much Bama's recruiting has improved as far as the offense goes. It's not just these big athletic weapons and then a quarterback to pitch the ball. They're getting the best quarterback as well. I mean, Bryce Young, who's coming up, is another one of those top recruits. That's going to be another Tua. So we'll see.
It's so crazy to think about kind of bringing it back to college yet again. Even just the guys who never get any recognition, the offensive linemen from Bama, the defensive linemen from Bama, they're next level. They go into the NFL and the Patriots pick them up with the 6th round pick or something that you never pay attention to. And they turn out to be some of the greatest guards, the greatest centers ever. And no one ever cares simply because they're the big men. But those kind of guys, those top level defensive ends and stuff like that are just cornerstones for good teams. And Bama just cranks them out like there's no tomorrow. It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's basically all I had for football this week. I kind of wanted to give a little bit of a shine to MLB. Obviously, we're kind of winding down the regular season here. Wild cards are still a little bit up in the air. The Cardinals have moved up and separated themselves from the rest of the pack. I think they're 3 games above the Reds, who are in the next closest spot. But I wanted to talk about the Padres a little bit. And at the beginning of the season, the Padres were one of the hottest teams everyone was talking about. Obviously, Fernando Tatis Jr., Manny Machado. I mean, they've got names all over that team. And Brandon and I, and I'm sure others, thought that the Dodgers and the Padres were going to be the number 1 and number 2 teams in the entire National League. And it seems like late in this season, the Padres have almost just shit the bed and just fallen off. I don't really know what it is. I think their pitching is probably the culprit mostly. There also seems to be something kind of going on in the dugout. And I've got a little clip here, courtesy of John Boy.
Good old John Boy.
Yeah, he's great, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
I'll play a little bit of it just so you can get what we're talking about here if you're watching live. And I'll just kind of set it up here. So basically, before this took place, Tatis was up to bat and he goes down looking. He strikes out, and it was sort of a questionable pitch. It was a little high, but I mean, honestly, I could see it being called a strike. And if anything, in my opinion, he should have fouled it off and kept going, but he didn't. And so after that, this whole ordeal kind of ensues, and we'll play the clip and then we'll talk about it.
Okay. And when he walks back to the dugout, he sees the third base coach yelling at Tatis a little bit, saying, "Hey, we can't have that. We can't have you yelling and screaming."
So there you see Manny Machado giving it to Fernando Tatis after his strikeout. And if you couldn't really hear what Manny was saying, he was basically saying, it doesn't matter. It's not about you. Go out there and play baseball. Everyone knows that you're the best player in the world, and you basically don't have the right to feel sorry for yourself. What do you think about that? Just right off the top of your head.
Man, I'm not a big baseball guy, but that's kind of embarrassing to have to watch that as if I were a Padres fan. I mean, it kind of shows a lack of maturity from Tatis Jr. Good on the coach for, nipping at him for doing that. But at the same time, it's a lot of it is how you carry yourself, whether you win or lose. And, I watched SportsCenter, so I've seen Tatis Jr. highlights all season. So for him to be acting that way after a strikeout, which whether it's questionable or not, it's like, come on, man, you got to carry yourself to a different demeanor. I mean, that's you don't do that.
The guy yelling at him is the third baseman. And that to me is one of the more interesting points of the whole thing. Manny Machado has a bit of a heel personality to him. A lot of people think he's a dirty player. You can do your own research on that if you want to. But this is interesting because he basically, took this upon himself to kind of straighten this kid out. Obviously, Manny's been in the league a little bit longer. He kind of was brought by the Orioles, got a huge deal from the Padres, and he's going to be here for a while. So is Tatis, or at least he has a long deal. Obviously, they can trade and do whatever. Nonetheless, Manny has just never struck me as a guy who was a leader. I mean, I always thought of him as he's out for himself. He's going to get a fat paycheck from somebody and then sit on his ass for 10 years and bat 230. I don't think that's the case. I think maybe that he actually does genuinely see a lot of good talent in this team, and he potentially thinks that it's just wasting away, and they're not doing anything at the end of the year where it matters most. Like I said, the Padres were expected to be a wild card team just under the Dodgers. That obviously doesn't seem to be the case, but it's crazy. And furthermore, I don't think that I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He's not very significant of a manager, but I don't think their manager has a job for much longer. Number one, the outcome of this season for them was not what they wanted. They threw money at a lot of different positions and they came up short. They didn't even make the playoffs.
They missed the playoffs.
They're about to. I mean, obviously it's not over yet. We still have to get through September, but it's not looking good for them. They're I think at least 3.5 games back from the second wild card spot.
That's disappointing to hear because I like seeing big highlights, and Fernando Tatis Jr. brings that out. So
yeah, and I think
it'd be cool to see a different team.
Absolutely, and I think that's a huge sore spot for MLB as a whole too, because like you said, even if you're not a baseball guy, you've seen Tatis highlights. They throw him up all over the place, and for good reason. He's extremely talented. But for whatever reason, this team has just kind of fallen apart here in September.
I mean, I'm not a baseball guy, you know that, but the two names I hear, Fernando Tatis Jr. and Shohei Ohtani, I mean, those names are everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I definitely think you're going to see some changes in the Padres coaching organization or coaching staff. I think their manager's probably not long for his job, especially at the end of the season once they probably don't make the playoffs and all that stuff, because like I said, this team was supposed to be one of the best teams in all of baseball, and they haven't done that at all. It's super interesting. The end of the baseball season is always very crazy because teams who were, third place in their division, they can squeak in and get a wild card spot if they get hot and other teams start losing. And I think you've seen that a little bit. Are you gonna tune in this October for some playoff baseball?
Are the Astros going to be in it?
Probably, yeah. I think they're going to win their division, and then whoever they face in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'll watch it.
I think they're going to be.
Astros are in it. Yeah, I'll check it out.
I think they're actually going to be pretty good this year. They're kind of sneaky good because everyone still kind of likes to give them crap for the 2017 season. But honestly, they still have a pretty good team. I think the AL West is a little weak. It's basically them and the Oakland A's, but the A's have kind of fallen off too. So this is their division to win for sure. And then, like I said, after that, it's just whoever they face in the playoffs, and then whatever happens after that. I'm super looking forward to October. Obviously, we're going to have football, and that's always exciting week in, week out. Playoff baseball, though, I'm way excited for it. The Cardinals might potentially get a wild card spot, and then it's off to the races after that. You never really know what can happen. I'm super looking forward to it. If the Astros do get in and start making a run, we might have to pull you back in and see what you think of some playoff baseball. Other than that, do you have anything you want to shout out? You want to give the people advice or whatever you want to say before we sign off here?
No, I don't think so. I mean, looking forward to Saturday for college football.
For sure.
2 games off the top of my head. I would say we're going to have Notre Dame and Wisconsin, which should be a pretty good one, 12 versus 18. But the biggest one for me is we have 7 Texas A&M taking on 16 Arkansas. So we're going to see the team that just beat up my Longhorns taking on another in-state rival, and I kind of want to see what happens. So it's right now A&M is a 5.5-point favorite. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. We'll see if the guys who have been in the SEC for a little bit longer can live up to that SEC name. You should definitely hit your boy Austin up and tell him to post another episode, because I've been patiently waiting for another episode of his podcast.
When was the last time he posted one? I feel like he has 3 right now, right?
Yeah, he did his little intro of 3 episodes kind of describing his life and what he's gone through, but he hasn't posted since. Austin, if you're out there, you are an amazing podcast host, and we need content from you. And you heard it here.
Yeah. I know the man's busy. He's got his MBA at Wharton,
Sure.
University of Pennsylvania, so he's busy as well. But yeah, if he can figure out a way to churn out some more episodes, that'd be good.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, anytime you want to come back on, we're more than welcome to have you. We will see you guys if you're a fantasy football fan on Saturday. If not, catch us back here on Monday for another regular Nest show. And thanks for coming by, and peace.